The collective had watched Earth for centuries. Their scientists had studied every aspect of human civilization with cold precision. They had measured the pollution levels, calculated the rate of resource depletion, and analyzed the endless wars that plagued the tiny blue planet. Their conclusion was unanimous and delivered without emotion. Humanity would be extinct within 300 years. The species was simply too violent, too destructive, and too primitive to survive the great filter that awaited all intelligent life. The collective recorded their prediction in the eternal archives and moved on to observe other worlds. They forgot about Earth entirely. 2,000 years later, Ambassador Vorthak of the collective stood on the observation deck of his diplomatic vessel. His 4 eyes blinked in disbelief at what filled the viewport before him. The space around the human home system was not empty as he had expected. It was not filled with debris from a dead civilization. Instead, thousands of warships hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced technology that made his vessel look like a child's toy. The Imperial fleet of United Earth had come to greet him, and Vorthak felt something his species rarely experienced. He felt fear. The flagship of the human fleet dwarfed everything else in the system. The vessel was called the Unconquered Spirit, and it stretched for nearly 50 kilometers from bow to stern. Its weapons arrays alone could have destroyed every ship the collective possessed. Vorthak had studied the historical records before coming here. He had read the ancient prediction about human extinction. He had expected to find nothing but ruins and silence. Instead, he found an empire that spanned hundreds of star systems and commanded military power beyond anything the collective had ever witnessed. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the Unconquered Spirit with her hands clasped behind her back. Her gray uniform bore the insignia of the Imperial Navy, and her dark eyes held the weight of responsibility that came with commanding the most powerful military force in known space. She watched the small diplomatic vessel approach on the main display and allowed herself a small smile. The collective had finally noticed humanity again. It had taken them long enough. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station constructed specifically for this purpose. Admiral Chun arrived with an escort of 50 soldiers in powered combat armor. Ambassador Vorthak came with only 2 assistants, their thin bodies trembling as they walked past the towering human warriors. The conference room was simple and functional, with a long table and chairs designed to accommodate both species. Chun sat down first, her movements calm and controlled. Vorthak took his seat across from her and tried to compose himself. The ambassador spoke first, his voice translating through a device attached to his throat. He expressed surprise at finding humanity alive and thriving. He mentioned the ancient prediction and asked how humans had survived when all data suggested they would destroy themselves. Chun listened patiently until he finished speaking. Then she leaned forward and began to tell him a story. Humanity had indeed come close to extinction. The prediction had almost proven correct. In the 23rd century, Earth had been devastated by a combination of climate catastrophe, nuclear war, and a genetically engineered plague that killed billions. The population dropped to less than 100 million survivors scattered across a ruined planet. The great cities became tombs. The oceans turned toxic. The sky filled with ash that blocked out the sun for decades. Every other species in the galaxy would have given up and accepted their fate. Humans did something different instead. They got angry. The survivors did not waste time mourning what was lost. They did not surrender to despair. They looked at the destruction around them and made a collective decision that would define their species forever. Never again would humanity be weak. Never again would they be vulnerable. Never again would anyone or anything threaten their existence. They began to rebuild with a fury that bordered on obsession. Every resource went toward recovery. Every mind focused on solving the problems that had nearly destroyed them. They worked together in a way they never had before, setting aside old hatreds and divisions in pursuit of a single goal: survival at any cost. Within 500 years, Earth was restored to its former beauty. But the humans did not stop there. They had learned that a single planet was too fragile, too vulnerable. They needed to spread across the stars to ensure their survival. The first colony ships launched in the 28th century, carrying millions of pioneers to new worlds. They encountered hostile environments that would have stopped any other species. They found planets with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, and deadly radiation. They colonized them anyway. The first alien species they encountered was the Syndicate of Merchants. These beings saw humans as potential trading partners and approached them with offers of technology in exchange for resources. The negotiations went well at first. Then the Syndicate tried to cheat the human delegation, believing these newcomers to space were naive and easily manipulated. They discovered their mistake when a human trade representative broke the tentacle of the Syndicate leader for insulting humanity's intelligence. The incident could have started a war. Instead, it earned humanity something far more valuable: respect. Word spread through the galaxy about the strange bipedal species that refused to be intimidated. Other civilizations took notice and began to watch humanity with interest. Some saw opportunity, others saw threat, a few saw potential allies. The humans accepted all of this attention with characteristic pragmatism. They made friends where they could and prepared for enemies where they must. The Imperial fleet grew larger with each passing century. Chun paused in her story and studied the ambassador's reaction. Vorthic's 4 eyes had grown wide, and his assistants had stopped trembling. They were now listening with intense fascination. She continued with the next chapter of human history. The first true test of humanity's military power came 300 years after the Syndicate incident. A species called the Devourers had swept across dozens of star systems, consuming everything in their path. They were biological weapons given sentient form, designed by a long-dead civilization to destroy all other life. Every species they encountered fell before them. Entire worlds were stripped of all organic matter within days. The galaxy trembled at their approach. Then they reached human space. The Battle of Proxima Centauri lasted for 6 months. The Devourers threw billions of their warriors against human defenses. They expected quick victory, as they had achieved everywhere else. Instead, they found something they had never encountered before: resistance that would not break. Human soldiers held the line with weapons designed specifically to destroy the Devourers. Human scientists worked constantly to develop new countermeasures against the enemy's biological weapons. Human commanders adapted their tactics with each engagement, learning the enemy's patterns and exploiting their weaknesses. The Devourers were destroyed completely, not defeated, not driven back, destroyed. Humanity hunted them across the galaxy and eliminated every last one of their kind. The humans understood something that other species did not. Some threats could not be negotiated with. Some enemies could not be allowed to survive. When the last Devourer died screaming on a forgotten moon, the galaxy looked at humanity with new eyes. Ambassador Vorthak interrupted the Admiral at this point. He asked why humanity had chosen such a violent path. He wondered if humans enjoyed warfare and destruction. Chum's response was calm but firm. Humans did not enjoy war. They hated it with passion that burned deeper than any other species could understand. But they had learned a terrible lesson in their darkest hour. The universe did not care about kindness or fairness. The universe rewarded strength and punished weakness. Humanity had chosen to never be weak again, even if that meant becoming fearsome in the eyes of others. The Imperial fleet that surrounded human space was not built for conquest. It was built for protection. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier existed for a single purpose: to ensure that humanity would survive no matter what threats the galaxy produced. The humans had expanded into hundreds of star systems, not to dominate others, but to spread their species across such vast distances that no single catastrophe could destroy them all. They had become an empire not because they craved power, but because unity gave them strength. Chun leaned back in her chair and asked the ambassador a question. She wanted to know why the collective had come after ignoring humanity for 2,000 years. Vorthik hesitated before answering. He admitted that the collective had detected a new threat emerging from the far reaches of the galaxy. Something vast and terrible was approaching, destroying everything in its path. The collective's own military forces had proven inadequate against this enemy. They had remembered the prediction about human extinction and sent a ship to confirm their death. Instead, they found the most powerful military force in known space. The admiral understood what the ambassador was truly asking. The collective wanted humanity's help. They wanted the Imperial fleet to save them from a threat they could not face alone. Chun considered the request carefully. She thought about how the collective had dismissed humanity as doomed and never bothered to offer assistance during their darkest hours. She thought about the suffering her ancestors had endured while other species looked on with cold indifference. Then she thought about the principles that had rebuilt humanity from the ashes. Strength protected the weak. Power carried responsibility. The very survival instinct that had driven humanity to become mighty also demanded that they use that might for worthy causes. If this new threat was allowed to destroy the collective, it might eventually come for humanity as well. Better to face it now, with all eyes, than later when the enemy had grown even stronger. Admiral Chun stood up and extended her hand toward the ambassador. It was a human gesture of agreement and partnership. Vorthik looked confused for a moment before one of his assistants whispered an explanation. He reached out with his own limb and grasped the human's hand awkwardly. The alliance was sealed. 3 months later, the Imperial fleet mobilized for the greatest military campaign in its history. 12,000 warships formed up around the unconquered spirit, their engines blazing with power that could be seen from light years away. Admiral Chun stood on her bridge and gave the order to advance. The fleet moved as one, a tide of steel and fury racing toward the distant threat that endangered the galaxy. The enemy they faced was ancient beyond measure. It was a machine intelligence left over from a civilization that had died before humans walked upright. It had spent eons traveling between galaxies, destroying all organic life it encountered. Its forces numbered in the billions. Its technology was advanced beyond anything the collective could comprehend. It expected easy victory when it entered this galaxy. It did not expect humanity. The war lasted for 20 years. Entire star systems burned. Trillions died on both sides. The machine intelligence threw everything it had at the human fleet, deploying weapons that could shatter planets and armies that darkened the stars with their numbers. For the first time in its eternal existence, it encountered an enemy that refused to surrender or retreat. The humans fought with terrifying determination, replacing every ship they lost with 2 more. They developed new weapons specifically designed to destroy machine intelligence. They adapted and evolved and learned. In the final battle, Admiral Chun led the assault personally. The unconquered spirit plunged into the heart of the enemy's command structure, its weapons blazing with the fury of a species that had survived extinction once and refused to face it again. Chen herself destroyed the primary processing core of the machine intelligence, firing the final shot that ended a threat that had terrorized countless galaxies over millions of years. When the war ended, Ambassador Vorthik stood once again in the presence of humans. This time, there was no fear in his eyes. There was only profound respect and something that might have been gratitude. He admitted that the collective had been wrong about humanity. They had looked at human violence and destructiveness and saw only doom. They had failed to see the other side of the equation: human determination, human adaptability, human refusal to accept any fate imposed upon them. Admiral Chun, now retired and gray with age, smiled at the ambassador. She told him something her grandmother had once said: humans were not special because they never fell. They were special because they always got back up. The galaxy had predicted their extinction, and they had answered with an empire that stretched across the stars. Their enemies had expected easy victory, and they had answered with fleets that made stars tremble. The universe had tried to kill them countless times, and they had answered with stubborn refusal to die. The ambassador asked what humans would do now that peace had been achieved. Chen looked out at the stars that her species had claimed as their domain. She said that humans would do what they had always done. They would survive. They would protect those who could not protect themselves. They would stand ready against whatever new threats emerged from the darkness between galaxies. And if anyone ever again predicted human extinction, the Imperial fleet would be there to prove them fools. The collective updated their eternal archives that day. The entry about humanity was completely rewritten. It no longer spoke of predicted extinction or inevitable doom. Instead, it contained a simple warning for any species that might threaten human space. Do not attack the humans. Do not threaten their worlds. Do not underestimate their resolve. They are not the dying species we once thought. They are the protectors of this galaxy, and their fleet knows no equal. 2,000 years after they were dismissed as doomed, humanity had become the most powerful force in known space. They had proven every prediction wrong and every enemy foolish. The Imperial fleet stood eternal vigil among the stars, ready to answer any call for help and crush any threat that emerged. And somewhere in the archives of the collective, the original prediction of human extinction remained preserved as a reminder of how terribly wrong even the most advanced species could be when they underestimated the will to survive.